How about if I just start at the beginning? You could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with us. And that's what the I Am Real world's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins. Brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Welcome, everyone, to Chasing Giants, episode 49. This is Terry Peer with Don Higgins on the phone. How are you tonight, Don?
I'm good. How are you, Terry?
I'm great. It's January 31st. We're at episode 49 in this podcast venture that we started a little over a year ago. And I just keep getting, the more time goes on and the more people we communicate with, the more humbled I get about how much support we're getting for this, what seemed to be like a kind of just a off-the-cuff idea of something we could do. So it's just amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what it is the hunting public is they're tired of the sales pitch, if you will, from most podcasts, hunting celebrities, however you want to put it. The hunting public is just becoming more and more educated, and they can easily see through these sales pitches. And they're tired of the celebrity hunters that are, switching sponsors right and left, and who just lose credibility. And I think the fact that we just tell it like it is, we throw our faith out there too. I think it's been very well received, and we certainly appreciate everyone's support.
When we first started talking about this, both you and I were a little concerned that we would have enough content to really talk about, especially this time of year. When you're doing your rut report and it's hunting season, we're always giving updates about what we find in the field. But there's no shortage of content, and especially the questions coming in. And I think, other people have tried to mimic this idea a little bit, but the questions are awesome. We're kind of packaging them up to be more relative to different episodes. So keep sending them in if you haven't heard it yet. But we really don't have a shortage of content to talk about. It's really almost hard for us to talk about and pick the topics that we're bringing up each week. So this week's going to be, we're going to dive in and spend a little bit longer talking about the lessons from a research herd segment, because I think that's going to dive in pretty deep on the nutrition side tonight. And we're going to tee up a little bit of what next week's episode, at least what we're planning for episode 50 next week. And if we can pull everything together, and that's going to be our food plot episode. We're getting so many questions about, I have a logging road that I want to plant, or I want to plant something in the woods, or how much real estate do I have to use soybeans? And we're going to try to get all those questions together for one big food plot episode, because people are trying to get their plan for this coming year. So hope to get that done for next week. So please submit your questions for episode 50 specific to food plots, and we'll try to get everything on there, and try to have some other people on too that can give some different perspectives from the ag side.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, Terry, if we're going to get all the food plot questioned in on one episode. We may have to do 2 episodes for food plot.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's why I want to go ahead and do it. Next week's going to be the first Sunday in February. If it takes a second episode, still give people time to react. I think the land management guide that we put together, Steve Shields did an awesome job with the layout and the more the graphic side of the publication. We're not publishers of magazines by any means. Good grief, we made some really bonehead mistakes in it. We made the whole magazine without putting a phone number in it, for Pete's sake. But I think as a whole, everybody really received that well as a tool used for food plots. So I urge you, if you didn't get a copy of that thing in Deer and Deer Hunting, we're giving it away for free on the Real World website. You just have to pay $3 for shipping. I urge you to go and get a copy of that. There's weed identification. We're going to continue to build on that. I got some farmer guys that I've partnered with this year that are going to try to help us identify weeds at a younger state to try to help with those resources. So we're gonna still build off of it, but I think that's been the biggest tool so far for land managers as it comes to food plots, don't you?
Oh, for sure. The feedback on that has been fantastic as well, and the fact that a year ago we put out the first one, we printed 15,000 copies, and distribution was basically just done through real world dealers and maybe a couple trade shows. Well, this year we went from 15,000 being printed to 120,000. So they're really making the rounds, and that's keeping us busy. I know the amount of questions that you're getting every day has exploded, and a big part of that is because of that land management guide. The information that's in there gets people thinking, and the thinking leads to questions, which comes our way.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of money on that project. And we could have used that real estate on those pages to promote product a whole lot more, but we chose to pull back that information a little bit more and try to give more resources to people trying to make their plan for this year. So the point is try to get your hands on one of those things. I use some of the content in that on social media quite a bit. So get your questions in. Starting next week, our plan is to spend at least one episode, if not two, on all things spring food plotting. And we probably need to at least next week make sure we cover all of the frost seeding type question, since that's what's coming up the fastest. So look forward to that, and maybe we might have a special guest on if we can make schedules work out for next week. So tell us a little bit. I'll be honest with you, I haven't done anything most of the week. I've been down with my back is out, and I'm having sciatica problems. So hopefully you've been a whole lot more productive than I have over the last week. What have you been up to?
I'm still traveling around doing consulting visits. This week I got 7 of them in, and typically I'm doing 5 or 6 a week. But I had a couple of small properties yesterday, so I got 2 properties in one day. Mainly this week I was in Indiana and Illinois, so I only spent one night away from home in Indiana this week, and other than that, most of them I could drive to. But again, I meet the greatest people when I'm out doing these visits, and they just treat me like a king. They roll out the red carpet, and they're always trying to buy my lunch or invite me into their home for a meal or give me a gift or something. And I'm just so blessed to do what I do.
Well, last time on the podcast that you told a story, it ended up with a breakout in laughs about whipping it out. So we're not going there tonight, but I am going to ask you to tell a story, because I haven't spoke to you, but I saw your post on social media about a young aspiring deer hunter that you got to meet this week. So I just thought it was cool. I want to learn more about him. Tell us a little bit about this kid that you posted a picture of this week.
Well, thanks to this podcast, my online book sales have just exploded. And, my wife and I, we spend every Sunday afternoon here in the past probably month and a half, we have done nothing but process book orders, as well as hats and T-shirts. But a lot of it's been the books. Well, I got an email last week that from this gentleman, and he had ordered both of my books for his son's birthday, which was last week, and the books had not showed up yet. And he contacted me a couple of days before this young man's birthday and wanted to make sure they'd been shipped and everything, and they had been about 3 weeks earlier, but he still didn't have them. And I told him, I said in an email, I said, if you don't have these books by your son's birthday, I'm going to be traveling through your area later in the week. I will personally bring you a set of those books, hand them to your son in person, and sign them for him. And, well, as luck would have it, the post office still didn't have the books there. And I got an email from the father, and he said the books haven't showed up. So I said, well, I'm going to be traveling through your area on Saturday, which was yesterday. And if it works for you, I'll just stop by and I'll give your son the books in person. He said, that'd just be fantastic. So the son had baseball practice yesterday. The son's name is Braxton. And Braxton had baseball practice yesterday. And
how old the kid is he?
If I was going to guess, I would say he's probably about 8 or 9 years old.
Oh, so he's a youngin'. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the dad told me what time baseball practice got over, and it was all worked perfect for my schedule. That's about when I was going to be coming through anyway. So gave me the address. I put it in my GPS, and I pull into this driveway, and there's this young man looking out the window, smiling ear to ear. I get out, and I walk in there with these books, and, that him and the dad answer the door, and I knew his name. His dad told me his name. And, this kid smiling ear to ear, and I call him by name. I said, "Are you Braxton?" He said, "Yeah." He had his notebook out. Well, he had his dad must have told him that I was coming because he had written down some deer hunting questions for me.
Oh, he had questions written down for you, so he wouldn't forget them. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So he went down his list and asked me the questions like, what's the biggest buck I ever shot and things like that. And, it was good for him and me both. It just made my day. But gave him the books and got some pictures with him and I gave him my business card, and he has his own email. So, he's promised that whenever he shoots a buck this fall, he's going to email me pictures of it. But, it made my day as much as it did his, I'm sure.
That's the real reason I wanted to talk about it because, it's kind of like when you coach as much as I do. If I could be half as much to these kids as they are to me, it's just such a blessing to see the kids and whatever they're doing, the smile on their face, and I think it's just proof that when we put others first, I forget how the phrase about blessings you've used so many times in your seminars, but it's just when you put other people first, you end up getting rewarded so much more than you could ever imagine. Well,
and Terry, this whole story, I can spin it a little bit that goes right back to the hunting industry. When I made that post yesterday, at the end, I had a scripture, to whom much is given, much is expected. And the first time that I heard someone use that scripture was probably, I don't know, at least 10 years ago. I interviewed Matt McPherson, who, owns Matthews Archery, started Matthews Archery. And just to get the chance to interview Matt, I had to go through a series of people, and I had to, give them the questions that I was going to be asking and all this. It was almost like I was interviewing the President of the United States.
Right.
But Matt McPherson had such an impact on me that one day. I mean, the guy literally prayed for me on the phone. But the article that I wrote was titled "The Matthews You Never Knew." And basically, if people only knew what Matthews does with their profits, they support missionaries all over the world. At that time, they had dug over 70 water wells in third world countries. And what they was doing was they was digging these water wells because that's where, all the people would come to get their drinking water and such. But then they were sending missionaries in, and missionaries were sharing the gospel with these people as they came to the water wells. And Matthews Archery at that time was supporting over 70 of these missionaries around the world. The Mission bow line, for example, 100% of the proceeds from that goes to supporting missionaries.
Right.
And I think if people knew what Matthews was doing with their profits, they would probably put every other bow company out of business. Everybody would be shooting a Matthews.
But the integrity there is they're not using that as a sales pitch, though. They don't even broadcast that.
No, they don't. And that's why I asked to write the article, because it was a well-kept secret.
Right.
Nobody knew it, but somehow, I don't remember now, but somehow I found out what they was doing and asked to write an article about it.
Right.
And it was just like an obscure article in the Matthews Hunting Annual that they was printing at that time and throwing in the box with every bow they sold. But on that phone conversation with Matt McPherson, he shared that scripture, to he who much is given, much is expected. And it's always stuck with me. And that was, Matthews Archery's basically philosophy or business model, if you will. Matt felt that he had been richly blessed, and as such, it was his obligation to share those blessings with others. And I feel the same way. I wouldn't trade what I do for anything on earth. I think I've got the best job in the world. I think I'm doing exactly what God made me to do. But, I think I need to share that with others. Or if I have a chance to help others in any way whatsoever, I think it's my obligation to do so, because I've been so richly blessed that I think it's my duty to share those blessings.
Yeah. If there's no better way to be blessed than be a blessing to someone else. Did I get that right? Something like that?
Yeah. If you want to be blessed, be a blessing.
Yeah. So I've heard that in your seminars for years. So very cool story. And hopefully what happens out of this, and this is what I've used to some of my softball players. And actually one of the kids that scored 1,000 points on our local basketball team, I made him a plaque for his 1,000th point. I said, just remember how you feel when I did this for you, and find a way to do that for somebody else. Remember what it feels like to be on that side. So hopefully this kid remembers what took you a couple minutes out of your time, but you made the time to do it, not to make you look better out of it, but hopefully something that this kid will remember and be a blessing to someone else at some point in his life. So very cool story. Let's talk a little bit. I got to keep from going on a soapbox a little bit here, but I know you had an incident this week with a property that you went and looked at, and the amount of people that's contacting us, asking us to look at aerial photos and say, what would you do? I'm going to shut up and just let you tell the story about this property this week, because people need to understand a little bit about why we take the position of not doing full plans from just a aerial and topo.
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to stay off of the soapbox here, Terry. But
I just said I was not going to get on it. I didn't say for you not to get on it. So
yeah,
please feel free, step up and take the mic. I'm going to have a good time just listening.
Before I look at a property or even agree to take on a new consulting client, I always ask them to send me an aerial of their property, and then I've got a series of questions I ask. But the aerial, it's very limiting on the information that it can tell you about a property. I actually get more information from the questions I ask, in regards to, say, hunting pressure on neighboring properties, or a client's goals for their property, or what other uses, what else are they doing on that property. But I take all that information in, and I almost always, I'll review that information before I go look at a property, and I've got an idea in my head for the property, what I'm going to do as far as habitat improvements and how I'm going to lay it out and such. And I can tell you for absolute certain that over 80% of the time, probably 90% of the time, the plan that I had in my head is totally scrapped and thrown away. And I do something totally different than what I thought I was going to do when I show up on the property. Well, this week I had a property, and the aerial looked, to be honest, brutally honest, it looked terrible. I thought, I was scratching my head like, I don't know what I'm going to tell this guy, but he wants me real bad, and I've already, if I see something, in the answers to his questions or on the aerial, I'll come right out and say, I think your goals for this property are out of line, and before I take your money, I want to discuss it with you that something's got to give here. You're either going to have to lower your expectations, or you're going to have to change some of the things that are going on this property or whatever. But on this particular property, I'd shared this with the landowner. He still wanted me to come, and I thought, well, I'll go and make it the best it can be. But, I'm just not sure how good it's going to be. And I pulled into the drive, and I've got my Onyx app on my phone, and I've got the property pulled up as I'm pulling into the drive, and I'm always looking at the surrounding neighborhood as I get close to a property. I want to see what's not only going on that specific property, but see what I can see from the road.
Driving in and seeing what the neighbors are. Yeah, making that checkerboard a little bit different. Yep,
exactly.
Yep.
And I pull into this guy's drive, and I'm thinking, man, this place looks bad. I don't know what I'm going to do for this guy, but I'll go have a walk, and I'll give it my best. And I'm telling you what, by the time I got back to my truck, I had never had a property, my opinion of a property changed so much on the walk as I did this one. There was so much that just could not be seen on that aerial, so much potential. When I got in my truck to leave, I have had no doubt whatsoever in my mind that if this client would just follow my plan, he can regularly shoot out. And I say regular, I mean every year he could shoot a nice buck there. And I mean a really good one, because he's in a pretty good area. But on the way home, I got to thinking of just how misleading aerials are. And I've said it in the past. I think anyone who is charging people, I don't care if you're charging them $5 to mark an aerial, that they're getting ripped off. And, our philosophy here is we're here for the hunting industry, or the hunting community, not the hunting industry. It carries right on over to anyone who's charging people to mark aerials. It's a total ripoff. And I'm not, and I could be doing it. I could be sitting at home, sleeping in my own bed every night, charging people $500 to mark aerials, and I could have a full-time job marking aerials.
Right.
But the reason I don't is because you just cannot give good advice for them. And it just bugs the crap out of me that there's people out there charging good money to mark an aerial. Now, sure, there's some obvious things that you're going to be able to see from an aerial. There's, access points, and there's inside corners, and you can take the topo, and you can see, ridge saddles and things like that. But anybody can see that. To charge people for basic information, I mean, it just bugs the crap out of me that we've got people that are taking people's money and not offering them something in return. And that's why I go through the series of questions and look at the aerial before I ever take on a client. If I don't think I can help somebody, I'm going to explain to them why and discuss it with them before I ever take a dime from them.
Right.
And then they can make a choice. Well, I still want you to come, or, yeah, I see what you're saying. I appreciate your time. And I'm fine with that. I don't need to be paid for every time I open my mouth. But if I do take someone's money, I want to feel like I'm giving them something in return. And I just don't think you get that when you're paying somebody to mark aerials. And that's my soapbox speech on that.
But it's not uncommon. And trust me, when we go to trade shows, and like when we were up at Northeast Ohio, the line of people that were waiting to come and talk to us was, we were blocking that area of the trade show hall, because people were standing 20 feet deep, and it helps us as we're trying to help people think about this, or we're not putting a plan together, we're just telling people, hey, you need to think about this basically, or worry about this, and it helps to look at a topo when we're having those conversations. But to put a plan together, that's a whole different level of what you provide to a customer. It's not a tree stand here, park here, and walk in. I think we can all handle that kind of conversation with a topo map. But I get that people want us to help them, and our customer service is we try to be a step above everybody else. You know, we're not into as much big box stores as what other brands are, and we try to go that extra mile to help people accomplish their dreams and make the right decision. But doggone it, I can't tell you enough from a aerial photo to tell you what to plant and how to hunt your property. It doesn't work like that. And what people don't understand with you is when you do those land consulting jobs, the product to plant in the field in the food plot is a very, very small percentage of what you're trying to help somebody with.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I've had the competition throw all kinds of accusations out there behind my back. Just at that Northeast Ohio show, there was a land consultant in another booth, told some folks that, no, Don, he's just over there. He just wants to sell you seed. He wants to come to your property and sell you seed. Well, I can tell you just this week, I can even give you names that, you know, I told these people, I don't care what you plant. You didn't pay me to come to your farm to give you a sales pitch on seed. That's not why I'm here. You paid me to come here and help you turn your property into the best big buck producing property it can possibly be. And that's what I'm here for. You know, I happen to believe in real world products. I started the company basically because I wanted my property to be the best it could be. But I'm not there to make a sales pitch for that. And to be brutally honest, you know, the food plots are such a small part of what I do anyway.
Exactly.
It's food plots is not going to help you kill big deer. I mean, they'll help, but they are such a small part of the total puzzle when it comes to managing a property to produce mature whitetails.
All right, so let's give something. You know, we've done the soapbox thing and, you know, vented a little bit, and I hope people understand why we take the position of. But let's give some meat and potatoes to the topic to our listeners of something that they can maybe put into perspective. If you have an aerial photo of southeast Ohio or eastern Kentucky, maybe parts of Missouri, maybe along the river, where it's really hilly and a lot of connecting woods and everything, you know, from the aerial you just see open field and connecting woods in all directions. There is no way, even if overlaid with a topo, that you can say where those shelf saddles and corridors are really going to be for those bucks to move, right?
Yeah, because sometimes the best, you know, spot for your stand or whatever is so subtle.
Yeah, we laugh about this guy that we heard speak a long time ago that would say, walk into the woods, find the biggest rub you can find, turn east and go 30 yards, and that's where you put your stand at. I mean, folks, some of this stuff is as big of a gimmick, a sales pitch as that. Let's transition to out in your neck of the woods, out in Illinois. I'm going to use two examples that I want you to be the one to describe it, but I'm going to set them up for you. One of them is a property. We no longer hunt it, but we could hunt it in years past. It's the property that we always drove around on the, let me get my bearings here. We drove around on the east side and went around the north side of a small block of timber out in the middle of open ag country, where we'd leave the truck running with the radio cranked up to where if there was a buck bedded in there, he knew that we were there, and we'd slip in and pull that card from the back side. But when we hunted it, we came around from the west side with the wind in our face. Talk about that little block of woods, because the way those deer came into that block of woods was a drainage in the field. It was just a slight little variation of open ag country. Talk about that a little bit for people so they understand.
Well, you know, a mature buck especially, he's going to use every terrain feature to his advantage as he travels. And even a topo map that shows the elevation changes, a lot of times these land features or topography features are so subtle that they're not even going to show on a topo map. So it takes boots on the ground to see this stuff.
Do you know the farm I'm talking about?
I think so. Was it one of those lease farms?
Yeah. So it was just on the other side of the county line from where I hunt. I mean, the ditch that came from the north is where a lot of those bucks came into that to scent check it, because we were hunting that farm with that stand. What did we need? We needed a southeast wind, I believe, for that farm, didn't we?
If we're talking about the same farm, yeah.
Yeah, so we were coming around and walking out into that field. That's the one I fell in. The ditch that I'm talking about is the one that I fell into in the middle of in the dark that morning. But
okay.
But yeah, we would come in and we'd walk around to the north, and we'd approach it from the northwest side with the scent, the wind blowing in our face. But coming straight from the north was just a drainage ditch, just of tall grass, and those bucks would come down that and scent check from that side, and that's where you had the stand at. The second one that I want you to talk a little bit about, because people can go onto YouTube and see what I'm talking about with this as soon as they listen to this podcast, and that's the Smoky video. So for people who haven't seen the Smoky hunt where Don killed the 206, he's setting on the east side, I guess the northeast side, a corner between switchgrass and timber with a little elbow inside corner of a food plot. And the heaviest trail coming out of that switchgrass, tell people where that is.
Well, it's just a little dip, in the field. You wouldn't even really think much of it, but it's enough of a dip that it hides the deer a little more as they travel out of that switchgrass into the plot. So they're not popping out right on top of the highest point on that edge, but the lowest point on that edge.
And people that come to your land consulting, we walk right past that. I'm sorry, your master class.
Master course.
And just seeing that little bitty dip that you're walking along, and it's like, okay, that's where we need to be set up at, and that's the type of thing that we can never get from a topo map. So we try to help as much as we can with the information that you give, but at the end of the day, we really can't set up a property to the way that we expect to hunt a property by a topo, and sure not how to hunt it. I mean, that really takes this time of year, boots on the ground, right?
That's what it takes. I mean, there's just no substitute for it. So, and if you're not getting boots on the ground, you're not getting a good plan. And I don't care who's putting it together. And that's not to say that there's not other good consultants out there, because there certainly are. But what I'm saying is, if they're not putting boots on the ground, then you're not getting the plan you deserve.
So two quick things. If you don't understand what we're talking about small little dips in topography that would never show up, go to any of the places. Just search Don Higgins and Smoky. Team Radical has one. Pro Talk Outdoors has one. Lethal Mission has one.
We got one on the Chasing Giants.
Chasing Giants, obviously, there's one there. So go watch that, and as Smoky pops up out the evening that Don killed him, look at that little dip in the topography where he pops up out of that. What you can't see in the Mel video is when he came out on the northwest corner of that switchgrass, there's also another little ridge shelf where he would feed out with his nose in the wind that direction that he came out to. We don't walk down that way in the master class, but deer are always going to use that topography. So now is the time of the year we always talk about intrusion and not putting pressure on your farm. Now is the time to be walking that when you're doing your shed hunting. We don't even walk it now. We were waiting until shed hunting season, but if you have to, I have a big oak log that I need to pull out here as soon as I can find a day when the ground's frozen. I'm going to be doing that work all at the same time this time of year. So get all of that out of the way and get your plan together for next hunting season right now. So if it's all right, let's transition to lessons learned from a research herd. We took a little bit more time than I wanted to, but I don't want to cut this segment short, even if we have to sacrifice a submitted question tonight. What is the topic for tonight from lessons learned from a research herd?
Well, tonight I want to talk about nutrition. And to go back to the very beginning, when I first acquired captive whitetails, I've shared before that, as a kid, I've always been interested in livestock. I showed livestock in 4-H and FFA. I had different livestock species, hogs, cattle, whatever, all my life. So I've learned a little bit about animal nutrition along the way. When I first got my captive deer, I thought, I know enough about animal nutrition that I'm going to be able to grow some giant racks on these deer. I'll just, feed them some high-powered feed with high protein levels and lots of mineral and things like that, and I'll grow some giant racks. And what I found out was that I knew absolutely nothing about whitetail nutrition. And it's been a long learning process through all the 25 years or so that I had those captive deer. And one thing that really stood out to me is that, in the hunting industry, a lot of hunters, marketers, whatever, seem to get hung up on the protein level of different plants, different deer feeds and such. And I thought the higher the protein, the better as well at one point. But, what I come to learn was that the protein level needs to be at a certain level. But above that level, it's not only going to waste, but it affects the deer's digestive system. In other words, my captive deer, for probably the first 2 years that I had them, as I was learning some of these things, they had the scours most of the time or diarrhea because my feed was just way too rich. What's really important in a whitetail's diet, you're going to want that protein level up to about 16 to 18% in a complete diet. Now, some of the plants they eat are going to be much higher and some are going to be lower, but when it's all balanced out, they need a diet that averages about 16 to 18%. A little bit high, like the 18% level in the summer when the bucks are growing their racks, the does are nursing fawns. And then in the fall and the winter, when they're putting on fat for the winter, but when they get into the winter survival mode, a little lower protein, down around that 16% level. But one of the things that I learned is how critical that fat is in a deer's diet. And I learned this by visiting a farm up in Wisconsin, wilderness whitetails. I don't know if you do a search for wilderness whitetails, take a look at some of the giant bucks. These folks grow, the fleece family.
Yep.
Actually, we visited the fleece farm because Shorty Fleece and his family feed some real world products to their deer, the Maximizer mineral, for example, they use, as well as our clover in their deer pens and such. But, I visited that farm, it was early in my experience with the captive deer. And what I learned on that first visit was how important the fat level is in deer's feed. A lot of these deer feeds that are commercially marketed, the fat level is probably going to be 5% or less. 5% actually would be pretty high. But there was a lot of captive deer breeders that were getting fantastic results with fat levels, 10, 12%, more than double what is, commonly accepted as the ideal. Fat is very critical. When I started bumping up the fat levels, and when I balanced out the protein level, and then I bumped up the fat level, the production of those captive deer just really took off. And not just their horns, but, their hair coat. They just looked healthier. They gained weight better. were in better body condition. So that fat level was very critical. Protein, I think, is overrated by many in the hunting industry. If someone's selling you clover or soybeans, for example, or whatever, they're going to say 38% protein or 40% protein or whatever. Well, those figures may be accurate, but a deer doesn't need 40% protein. Or if he does eat something that's 40% protein, then he's going to eat something else like natural browse that's going to bring that overall level down.
Offset it back.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to balance it out. So, yeah, he may go out and he may eat on some soybean leaves that are 40%, but by the time you mix it in with the sticks and leaves and everything else that he eats, it's going to be down to about that 16 to 18% level in their total diet. But, I think one of the reasons I'm so excited about this new NutriCrave corn is the fat level in it. The fat level in that NutriCrave corn is literally 5 times higher than in the typical hybrid corn that we've tested from ag fields. So, where else is a deer going to get that fat from? There's not that many, food sources that are available to a wild deer to get those kind of fat levels. Our real world soybeans, for example, we're looking at fat levels. We put that blend together. Fat levels in those soybeans is one of the things we looked at. And I think that's why it's so popular. I think that's why you can pull deer off of other soybean plots, is because of the fat level in those soybeans. So, don't get all hung up. The lesson here is don't get all hung up on protein levels in your feeds, because even if you do have something that's really high in protein, the deer is going to just naturally balance that out with other things.
I think off the top of my head, this indirectly came up in our episode with Dr. Bronson Strickland, because remember he said that the deer kept going into the woods and browsing on this shrub, and they couldn't figure out why until they did a tissue analysis, and it ended up that there was some micronutrient in that shrub, or they were eating the twig, I think he said. It wasn't available anywhere else in their diet. So, I think the nutritionists out there that specialize in whitetail have all been consistent in saying that a deer will consume what the deer needs. Based on, it's just God's creation being as awesome as what it is. A lab, you can pour something out on the floor and they'll eat 50 pounds of it. A deer is able to go and consume different things based on what they need and regulate that. So if somebody is in a state right now where that allows supplemental feeding based off this thing that you've talked about just now, if they're going and looking at a package, and this isn't a real world commercial, this is just, if you're going to look at a package and you want to do something besides just corn and you want to offer nutrients and something to help with supplemental feeding right now, what is that kind of balance for fat, protein that we need to be looking for that's optimal, or a way that we can get the fat level up if we're mixing feed?
Well, it all comes down to ingredients. Deer and other wildlife and livestock have the unique ability to balance their own diets given the opportunity. And in a state where supplemental feeding is allowed, it's a whole lot easier for the land manager to provide that to his deer. In a state like Illinois, where I'm at, where you're not allowed to supplemental feed or use minerals, the way to do it is diversity in your plots. That's one of the reasons, I like Deadly Dozen as part of my food plot program, because there's 12 different plants in that blend, and each plant is going to have a different nutrient makeup. So, one plant may be high in, say, vitamin A, and another one's high in vitamin E, and one's high in zinc, another one's high in copper. And with all those different plants, the animal can balance his diet and get exactly what he needs.
So the ratio of protein to fat that we can't get one completely out of whack by having just, 40% protein, no fat, nothing else for the animal. It's almost like how we mix our mineral. It's not just putting a bunch of one product in. It's the right ratios of every different thing that ends up balancing out to what the deer needs as far as gut health and herd health. So pretty interesting conversation. So if you're looking at opportunities to raise your game on the nutrition side, focus on fat just as much as you are the protein, and I think you'll have the results that you're looking for. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We probably need to even take that a step further, Terry, because there's macro and micronutrients, and the macros are needed in higher levels, the micro in much smaller levels. But a lot of times these different nutrients work in conjunction with each other, so they need to be in specific ratios. Our maximizer mineral, for example, this is going to sound like a commercial, but it's basically the facts. There are certain nutrients that need to be in certain ratios with each other. And I'm just going to give a couple of examples here. One is phosphorus and calcium. Phosphorus and calcium need to be in a 2-to-1 ratio for the deer to maximize the usage of it, or for the body of the deer to properly utilize it. So in other words, there should be twice as much calcium as there is phosphorus. If you're looking at any mineral product, it's very easy to tell if it's a quality product by just looking at those two ingredients first. If there's twice as much calcium as there is phosphorus, then you're on the right track. And that will eliminate, I'm telling you, that'll eliminate 90% plus of all mineral products out there. Just look at the calcium and phosphorus, and if they're not in a 2-to-1 ratio or close to a 2-to-1 ratio, forget that one. Another one is zinc and copper. They should be in a 4-to-1 ratio. And if they're not, then, that product is not as well balanced as it could be. The maximizer has those in the proper ratio, but we've also got like 20 different macro and micronutrients in that mineral. And, we talked about the fleece family and wilderness whitetails up in Wisconsin. And the reason that they use our products is because, and they're growing these giant bucks, is because, they recognize and have for decades the importance of having the right nutrients, but also having the right nutrients in the right ratios. And I know that sounded like a maximizer, real world maximizer commercial. But again, the reason Real World was started was because I wanted to have the very best products possible on my own property. And yeah, I cannot use the mineral on my Illinois farm, but I certainly can on my Ohio property. And, just compare the tags. I mean, I challenge you to compare the maximizer mineral tag with any other mineral tag out there. I don't care where it comes from the livestock side, from, the hunting industry side, wherever. Just compare the tags.
Well, and from a non-commercial standpoint, it's the science behind the product and what's on that seed tag. So just look at your seed tag, and if you find something that meets your standards and meets those objectives, by all means, go buy it. That it's like Don said in his consulting. We're not necessarily here to make you a sales pitch, but it's easy for us sometimes to use the examples of the products and why they're created the way they are. Hopefully that helps you make better decisions for the products that you buy. As simple as that. So without further ado, let's move on to the buyafarm.com property of the week.
Buyafarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Okay, this week's featured property is an online auction, actually. It's a 100-acre property in Washington County, Illinois, which is, the property is actually located about 8 miles southeast of Nashville, Illinois. The auction actually ends here pretty quick, February 11th at 8 p.m. I just checked the auction today, and the current price is less than $2,000 an acre. So there's a chance that you could get a real bargain here from this one or with this one. But the 100 acres, about half of it, or about 53 acres, is cropland with a good fertility index of 98.3. There's some smaller creek bottom fields, but there's also some oil wells and a tank set on the property. The woods is kind of scattered. If you look at the aerial, it lays out pretty well. But the thing that really jumps out at me is the price. I think for someone looking to buy their first hunting property, this is a good chance to get it done at a very reasonable rate, and recoup your money at any time.
You say it's under $2,000 an acre, but it's got 53 acres of cropland on it. You could probably lease that to a local row crop farmer and get quite a good income return out of it, and still have some dandy hunting property. So you got about 2 weeks left on this online auction. So who's the agent on this property?
The agent on this one's Wayne Keller.
Okay.
Wayne's phone number is 618-407-1679. You can find it on buyafarm.com, and I'm sure Wayne would be happy to show you the property.
All right, good deal. So you got 2 weeks to go check this one out. This might end up being a bargain for you. So before we move on to the listener submitted questions, just a quick update. This past week, people started getting their Chasing Giants hats. The first rounds of those went out this week. So we sold way more than what I would have ever imagined. And there's a couple of people that are I made a post. The lady who made the hats for us this time, she made me a front license plate, and I kind of made a joke because Illinois makes you guys use a front license plate for the state. I don't have to do that here in Kentucky, so she made me a Chasing Giants license plate for the front of my truck. And a couple people have been asking about decals for the back of their window. If that's something you guys want, just send me a private message, and me and Don will try to get something out there for you and put on the website. But again, we appreciate the support. If you've bought a hat, you should be seeing it here in the next week and a half. We'll ship out the second wave of those probably, maybe not this week, but the following week. And we're probably going to shut those down at some point in the near future. So make sure you go to Higgins Outdoors and check out those along with Don's books. So what do we have for questions for tonight?
The first one comes from Matthew Brewski from Plainview, Minnesota. I'm actually going to do a land consultation for Matt and his family. And Matt, I appreciate your patience. I know I haven't got there yet. Hold on. I'm going to get to you just as quick as I can. But Matt says, "Hi, Don and Terry. I'm a big fan of the podcast, and I've learned so much from the content already. My question is on harvesting does. Our property is a little over 300 acres, and generally we have no more than 4 people hunting on it throughout the year. It borders large tracts of public hunting land and falls within a DNR zone that only allows the harvesting of 1 deer per year per hunter, buck or doe. Since we can only harvest 1 deer, this has led to does almost always getting a free pass. Should we be concerned that at some point our doe numbers will get too high? Thanks, Matt." Doe harvest is a topic that I get a lot of questions about, and in my opinion, there's been a lot of hunters fall into the trap of thinking that we've got to harvest does, we got too many does, and I get all these questions from my consulting clients, especially this time of the year or during the late season. They'll say, I've got 20 does in my plot every night. I think I need to harvest some does. And a lot of times what you're seeing out there is not only your resident does, but if you've got a good food plot program, you're seeing your neighbor's does and maybe does from 2 or 3 miles away all coming to your farm. I think the doe harvest thing has, been taken to the extreme. In this situation, Matt, I would say that your state DNR is not going to allow the deer herd to get out of line. If the number of deer in your area starts to raise or get too high, they're going to change the regulations and allow you to shoot more. I think that most state game agencies are well tuned to their deer herds, and if there's one thing they're not going to do, they're not going to let the herds get totally out of whack, or the population get too high, simply because of a number of reasons. The insurance lobbies are pretty powerful, and they don't want to pay for these deer car collisions, so they have an influence on the state legislatures, which have an influence on the DNRs or whatever to keep the deer numbers down. I just don't see it being too much of an issue. On my own property, for example, in 2011, I shot 7 does, or me and other hunters that were guests of mine shot 7 does and 4 bucks. Then in 2012, we had the terrible EHD outbreak, which, we lost probably 75% of our deer. From 2011 until this season, I had not shot a single doe, nor had anyone hunting as my guest had not shot a single doe around here on this entire section since 2011. This year we shot 2 does, first does harvested since 2011. Simply because the state DNR did absolutely nothing after that EHD outbreak in 12. And, as a private landowner, deer manager, I had to make the choice myself to back off of the doe harvest. I think a lot of times hunters just think it's, my obligation or my right to go out and shoot does because I want the venison, and the law says I can do it, so I'm going to go do it. And I think more often than not, we shoot too many does, at least in some of the situations that I've seen. Now, I say that I know there's areas where plenty of does need to be shot, but there's also plenty of areas where it doesn't hurt to back off the doe harvest. So my suggestion to you is that at this point, if it's not an issue, I'm going to guess that your state DNR is going to address it when and if it does become an issue.
I think the big key there is I think people freak out too quickly about needing to shoot does. And you use the analogy, if you're doing what you should be from a land management perspective and providing food sources to get those deer through the winter, you got more deer on your property right now than is usually resident, even especially in big ag country. So I wouldn't put a lot towards it. Okay.
Yep, agreed. So we're going to move on to number 2, and this one's also a doe question. This one comes from Bob Longo from Meadville, Pennsylvania. Bob says, on your podcast number 48, you speak of super does who pass on genetics of their father to produce bigger bucks. Using this logic, what is the best way to harvest a doe for herd management and not mess up having a good gene pool doe? I live in Pennsylvania, and we have a hard enough time getting mature bucks, so I'd like to better my odds if possible. Awesome podcast, and thank you for speaking about Christ and keeping him first, Bob. As far as selecting which does to harvest, there is absolutely no way whatsoever that you can look at a doe in the wild and know that she's the one carrying the best genes or the worst genes. There's just no way to know that. So when it comes to doe harvest, look for that doe with the button buck fawns. She's the one you want to harvest. And it really is that simple. You want to add anything there, Terry?
The one on the right.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there's 2 does there, shoot the one on the right. I don't know. There's no way to know.
No. I mean, even the super does in captivity, it takes a long time to figure out which ones are the super does. I mean, they're well up there in years by the time you figure it out, because she's got to have fawns and from multiple bucks, and those fawns have to reach maturity to see, how good they're going to be. So
I bet that feller that was stomping up and down the aisle for the king buck could tell us which one to shoot, but we're not going there.
I think that guy told us more than we want to know, Terry.
All right,
none of it accurate. But.
We got time for one more question.
The last one comes from Ryan Howe of Graysville, Ohio. Ryan says, Don and Terry, really enjoyed listening to the podcast. I would really like to get the opinions of both of you guys. I've deer hunted for as long as I have memories back and have run cameras since you had to take the film to Walmart and get developed. Now, before I ask the question, I would like to state that in my circle, I'm kind of the guy people come to for scoring a deer from pictures. I've rarely been off by much. Now, question time. Do you think social media has ruined the notoriety of a buck's true score? I see so many pics of deer on social media platform with scores that just don't add up. It's almost got to the point of not scoring my own deer. Well, unless it's a 200. Congrats on Mel, and the video was awesome. Most of its views is probably me. Well, Ryan, first of all, thanks for the congratulations. I really appreciate it, but I know exactly what you're saying. I see it all the time on social media that, someone throws out a score on a buck, and if it's off a little bit, I don't think too much of it. There's, a lot of bucks. The second buck I shot this year, Joey, I'm not sure that photos do that buck justice. I'm not sure that any of those photos make him look like a 185-inch deer, but I assure you he is. And so the older I've gotten, the more time I've spent on social media, I've gotten a little bit better about giving people the benefit of the doubt. But even at that, there are some pictures and scores thrown out with them that I know for a fact are way off. And I don't know that it's ruined the sport or anything, but I think there's a lot of people that don't know how to score deer. I mean, I've had friends that I know are trustworthy people throw scores of deer out and that I know are inaccurate because I've seen the deer in person. And I don't think it's because it's a dishonest hunter. I think it's just that they don't know how to score. For example, I seen one guy one time that, he would measure a buck's tine length, and he would start out at the end of the tine and he would come down to the bottom of the main beam. And that's the length, so he was adding, at least an extra inch or so on every tine. And I think a lot of it's just people don't know how to score. But, there's also people that I know that I see their bucks, and they don't even care what the true score is. They just want to make up a number. Every deer they score, you can just, it's going to be, the number they throw out is at least 20 inches higher than what the deer actually scores. But, to each his own. I'm not going to let somebody else's picture and number run anything for me. I'm going to be as honest as I can. And, that's about all we can do.
I don't think it has anything to do with social media specifically. I think social media just allows more people to see it. Those people are going to do it whether it was 20 years ago before social media with a picture that they had printed at Walmart than the ones that they posted. It's just that way. Same people that say that, a 2.5 or 3.5 year old is a 6-year-old. I don't get it. It's to each their own. It doesn't bother me. I don't think it's ruining the sport. It just kind of, how do I say it? It gives me a better indication of who the person is than anything. The problem is I would pat somebody on the back for shooting a 125-inch 2-year-old or 3-year-old. If they were happy with it, I'm happy, and I'll congratulate them. To make up a story, to make yourself be better credentials or keep up with the Joneses, that just tells me more about the person than it does the deer. I could care less. So I think
good point.
I think it's the same now as it's always been. It's just social media probably lets you see a little bit more of it than what you're used to. So it is what it is.
Well, we appreciate your question, Ryan, and Chasing Giants T-shirt will be headed your way. So I guess as we close out, Terry, we want to encourage people to send those food plot questions.
Yep, absolutely. I think I agree with you. I think we're going to probably need more than one episode, but I know that we'll get a lot of questions that are kind of the same topic. So get us those questions. We want to talk about what you want to talk about, and the questions and issues that you have on your property. But I assure you that most of it's going to come back to you doing yourself the favor of doing a soil test. I'll just give you a little teaser ahead of time. So outside of that, where are you going this week?
Well, I'm not sure yet. Actually,
Okay.
with the weather, I was planning on going to northern Missouri and Iowa. But before I leave, I'm going to be checking the weather. Tomorrow, I'm going to be in southern Illinois with my real estate license. I'm going down there with my buddy Todd Ewing, and we're going to list a couple properties. But then Tuesday, I was headed, west. But I'm hearing that they've got some significant snowfall where I was going, and I don't really feel like tromping around in a foot of snow to look at a property.
Well, you don't want to be out in that anyway. I know bad weather is setting in tonight a lot of different places. Poor little Kentucky's going to get like 4 inches. It'll probably cripple the whole state with 4 inches of snow. We're not used to that. I saw a picture today. My cousin Josh Kiter, shout out to him. He's probably out plowing snow in Northern Virginia. I know Pennsylvania and the southern tier of New York's getting hammered tonight. So everybody that's out, that has to be out, please be careful. And I guess just you'll have to kind of play that by ear based on what the weather is. So I know I'm not going to probably get into much until this back situation levels itself out. So with that, try to be a blessing to somebody. Make a difference in some kid's life or a neighbor's life. Hopefully you'll be blessed in return. So take us out, Don.
All right, we want to thank our sponsors, buyafarm.com, 360 Hunting Blinds, Quiet Cat, Lone Wolf Tree Stand, Matthews, Real World Wildlife Products, and Vortex Optics. Hope you all have a great week.